So now we're going to move into case studies, which is an interesting approach for a webinar. We're hoping that it works. We've identified 3 scenarios that are very common board challenges. And what we're going to do is give you 30 seconds or so to read the case study. Maybe jot down a few reactions if you have a, we didn't ask you to get a pen handy, but if you have something handy, just to, you know, what it makes you think, what issues it makes you think about. And then Harry, Steve, and I will take a couple minutes to discuss the issues and review best practices as they apply to the cases. We're, you know, a little short on time, so and we know that these cases raise a lot of questions for people. So it's definitely possible that at the end of this discussion, you're going to have questions that we haven't answered. So please make sure you send us those questions in the chat box, and we'll make sure we get back to you after the webinar. So our first case happens at the grocery store. So I'll give you a few minutes to, or a few seconds, 30 seconds, we'll say, to read it over. It's just the screensaver. Some questions to prompt your thinking. So we've actually done a few of these trainings before and have had conversations with board members from all over the state on these cases. So I'd like to just ask Harry, based on some of those conversations, what issues have you heard from board members being raised in this case?
What I hear mostly is board members trying to balance their relationships with community members and listen in a way that makes the community member feel heard, cared about, really acknowledge their concern, while at the same time having the community member understand that as a member of the board, they operate within certain boundaries. And in particular, when there's a complaint lodged, that there's a very clear chain of command that serves to recognize everyone's rights and opinions in the situation and guides the process through a really thoughtful set of steps. And again, I think it's that balance between, I mean, this could be a good friend, a neighbor, even a relative. Balance your care and concern and your relationship with the system that you're required to follow as a board member in order to guarantee everybody's rights in the situation. So I think that's the central tension I hear from board members.
Thanks, Harry. Steve, do you want to talk through some best practices that you would recommend?
Sure. I got to tell you, those of you that are out on the other end of this webinar, this is a lot more fun when you're all in the same room together because this particular one stimulates tremendous response. In fact, usually when people are given this to read, there's a lot of laughter, given the fact that everybody who's been on the board for more than a week or two has had this precise situation occur. So we're going to just give you our best thinking on these, as both Nicole and Harry have said. You know, these are just a couple of random thoughts. You all are elected officials, and I've had a lot of experience in my life with elected officials of all stripes. And one of the things that every elected official wants to be is responsive to their community. You are elected for purpose. You are the, you know, it's all that stuff we talked about. You're the liaison with your community. Part of, you know, part of your job is really to have your ear to the ground. It's important that you have a sense of what's going on, what your community is thinking. And all of those things are, you know, are good things. But obviously, when somebody comes up to you with this kind of an issue, you're immediately in a role conflict, potential role conflict situation. Your job is oversight of the whole system. Your job is not to fix this problem. Your job is not going to be to go in and to observe the teacher and tell the teacher how he or she should improve teaching. So you've got to immediately sort out in your own mind what is my proper role. So I think you're right. I think it's important that people be good listeners, be empathetic, and then to be helpful. And the best way that I can suggest to our listening audience tonight is that people always try to guide folks to the people who can help them solve the problem. So if it's concerned about your teacher, probably the best way to get that attention on that issue is to talk to the teacher and say, I'm really concerned about what's going on in the classroom. And if you've already done that and it's not been successful, then going to the principal. And if the principal has not been responsive or that strategy was not successful, then go to the superintendent. But the level, they need to go to the level of the person that can deal with it, because you as a board member, that is, your role is not to go in and fix that problem. But having said that, I think it's also important to remember that all complaints are not created equal. And certainly, if it's a serious complaint that concerns you as a board member in terms of what it tells you about the overall operation of the school, I would think it's very important for a board member to share that information with probably the superintendent, depending on your communication patterns in your district or your principal. And if it's something really serious that you're really concerned about, you might want to you might want to be taking it also to your well, you should probably talk to your board chair as well if you're talking to the principal. It may be something the board wants to take up in executive session, and the board may say would like a report back on how that situation got dealt with. But there is no cookie cutter for this situation, because these kinds of conversations go all the way from the person who always likes to complain about everything under the sun, and you know, it's all kind of the background noise that we all deal with, all the way to a very serious situation that a board member should really be taking some ownership to make sure that it gets handled by administrators.
Sounds good. Thanks. So we have a few highlights from the discussion here in terms of a way to handle complaints. First one, receiving the complaint, you know, making sure the person feels heard. It's great. You know, it's great if a school district person they're hearing from what the process is. Work them through the chain of command. If you think it's necessary or wise, inform the chair and administrator. Offer to follow up with the complainant if appropriate. And always remember, again, that the board is the final level of complaint appeal, not the first. Steve?
Just one other. Again, this is all dependent and et cetera. Official school board members. Sometimes it feels like if the guidance is you need to go to the principal or you need to go to the superintendent, it can feel bureaucratic. It can feel like you don't care or you don't want to know about some bad thing that somebody is sharing with you. So I think it's very appropriate if it feels like the right thing to do to say to somebody, you need to go to the superintendent with this and deal with the situation. I mean, that's the person that can fix it. But if you've gone down that road and you're not happy with the outcome, you can feel free to come back to me. At which point, then obviously your next move would be, if the person comes back, to call the superintendent and say, this person, I sent them back to you, they were not satisfied, and I'd like you to, find out from the superintendent what happened, and then ask them to deal with it again, and then let you know what happened. So it's important not to stay within your role, but also that doesn't mean you're sort of like putting up this ice cold facade that says I can't do it. I'm not going to talk to you about anything.